you really tried to pin them down at the start of the hearing. What's your take on their responses today?
If I were those three CEOs, I think all of them experienced something that they hadn't experienced in some of their previous appearances before our committee, and that was a united Democratic and Republican committee that has just reached a point where we're convinced that all our attempts to get them to self-regulate have failed. All of the promises and reforms that they promised to implement didn't happen. And I think the public is finally starting to understand, too, that when a company doesn't make a product, you're the product. Or more specifically, your data is the product. And these companies are monetizing people's data without their knowledge and permission, basically. And the way that happens is they have to get eyeballs on their screens. They have to get people engaged. And they do it in a way that's devious. People used to think of Facebook, and I talked about the two faces of these platforms, that, Facebook is the family and friends neighborhood, but, right next to it is a neighborhood where white nationalist rallies take place every day. And YouTube, people think you just share quirky videos, but down the street, you've got anti-vaxxers and COVID deniers and QAnon supporters and flat earthers sharing videos. And the thing that angers people is that it's one thing if the user chose to go to those sites organically. But what people don't realize is everything is scripted on these social media platforms. Facebook recognizes antisocial tendencies in one user and then invites them to visit the white nationalist. YouTube sees another user that's interested in COVID-19 and auto starts an anti-vax video. I mean, there's 12 super spreaders on these internet platforms that are responsible for almost 70% of all the misinformation on vaccines. And we all know that the January 6th insurrection originated on Facebook. So if they can't police themselves, it's way past time for Congress to take steps to do that. And I think you heard a lot of that today.
Do you think Republicans and Democrats will actually be aligned on the issue of big tech as a result of today's proceedings? And what does that mean in terms of achieving some sort of consensus on whether it's changing legislation or new legislation or some kind of regulation going forward?
I think Congress is ready to regulate. I think both sides are interested in seeing what proposals can build consensus around that. And I think it could take a variety of looks. Some of it may involve reforms to Section 230. Some people want to outright abolish Section 230. Another idea that's being promoted is that, the FTC and the FCC don't have the expertise, the manpower, or the teeth in their rules to police these internet platforms. I mean, when Facebook got fined $5 billion, their stock went up that day. These fines don't mean anything to these companies. We feel, many of us, that we need a new federal agency that exclusively regulates these internet platforms, that is staffed with experts that understand this technology, understand how the algorithms work, and an agency that would have rulemaking authority and real teeth in it to regulate these internet platforms. That's one idea that's gaining some momentum. Others seem to be around various changes to Section 230. But I can tell you this, there's members on both sides of the aisle that are ready to sit down and talk about what can be put forward. And the same is happening in the Senate, too.
Congressman Doyle, did any one of these companies stand out to you as the worst offender, or did any one of the CEOs not live up to your expectations in terms of the way they responded to your questions?
Well, these CEOs are all coached by, their attorneys or whomever to not answer questions directly or to run the clock out. They know that members have 5 minutes to answer questions. And when you try to get them to just give yes and no answers, it's very difficult for them to say the words yes or no. They want to filibuster. Well, we don't filibuster in the House. And if anyone was watching the proceedings today, a number of us weren't allowing them to do that. Mr. Zuckerberg has been in front of the committee several times. We have written to him for follow-up to many questions we had. They don't get back to you, or they make you go to the courts to get certain information. And they basically never give direct answers to questions. He is particularly evasive when it comes to that. But they all were trained to do the same thing. I was surprised that, one of the questions I asked early on is whether any of those internet platforms felt they bore some responsibility for what happened on January 6th. And Jack Dorsey said to some extent, yes. And I was surprised that he actually, obviously they all did. Facebook, they gathered 350,000 people in 12 hours on the Stop the Steal. And FBI has documents that a lot of that planning was planned on the Facebook sites with people. So they all had some degree of culpability in it, but only one of them would say that.
Congressman Doyle, what do you want to see next?
We're going to see legislation. We made it pretty clear to them today that we're prepared to legislate. We are the committee of jurisdiction on this matter. Next is going to be some meetings amongst members in both parties on the subcommittees initially, and then we're going to bring in other members we have some other members that may not be on the committee but have some expertise and interest in this issue too. And we're going to talk about a package, whether it's one big comprehensive package or whether it's a series of packages or whether it's the creation of a new agency. Those discussions will probably determine on which route we're going to take. But the chair of our full committee, Frank Pallone, made it clear that we're going to legislate, and we're going to do it this year.
President Trump was mentioned fewer times than I expected him to be. And I wonder, with President Trump out of office, does that create more room for Republicans and Democrats to reach consensus on this? Why do you think that is? He didn't come up as much as many of us thought he would. Well,
you'll never hear me complaining that he didn't come up. I don't know. To me, that's just one more symptom of the problem. We shouldn't confuse, there's some accusations that these platforms are trying to stifle conservative viewpoints. I don't believe that's true, and I don't believe that's what anyone wants to do. What we want to stop is disinformation and misinformation. If the former president wants to talk about his opinion on a certain issue, that certainly should be allowed. What he can't do is say, I won the election in a landslide, and if you want your country back, you're going to have to fight for it. There's no truth in that statement. So,
Congressman Doyle, he's been suspended from Facebook. He's been suspended from Twitter permanently, but Facebook indefinitely, and that decision is now going to an oversight board. Do you think he should be banned from Facebook permanently?
Well, you know what? I'm very biased on that situation. I think he's been a very divisive voice in the country, and the less that people hear from him, the better it is for the country. But I think that we should not let people use those forums to lie and spread misinformation, which causes bad things to happen. His voice on Twitter caused an insurrection to take place on January 6th. Super spreaders and the anti-vaxxer movement are causing people not to get the vaccine, and some will die as a result of that. Those should be banned from sites like that because they're doing harm to people and our democracy.
Meantime, we've got about a minute left, Congressman. We are in the middle of a pandemic. Vaccine misinformation was talked about a lot. What do you think the biggest threats are right now posed by Facebook, by Twitter, by Google when it comes to COVID?
Well, the thing is, they have the technology and the power to take down these 12 super spreaders tomorrow. And that's what has many of us angry. It's not that they can't do it. They, for some reason, choose not to do it. And as a result, people get information online that, I think it was Congressman Cardenas was saying that his mother or grandmother, read online that if you got the vaccine, that a chip goes into your arm when they give you the vaccine and the government tracks you. People read stuff like that and they're afraid to get the vaccine. There was one of these super spreaders said Hank Aaron died from getting the vaccine. Targeting African Americans who already to some degree are skeptical about vaccines due to some historical events. This is causing a lot of people not to get the vaccine, and we know what happens if certain people aren't vaccinated. So it's a real problem, and they can fix it if they want to.